Hi, I'm Dan Elder from Kidasa Software. Welcome to the first part of the Basics training with Milestones Professional. We're going to be using Milestones Professional 2021, so I'm going to go ahead and open the software. When you open the software, you should get a list of kind of your recent files here. I'm going to start with a default template, so I'm going to click Start a New Schedule from my default template, or you can just press Cancel at this point and it'll do the same thing. So here is the Milestones Professional screen. I'll be kind of talking about different parts of the screen right now. So up here you've got the toolbar and you've got a lot of different tabs, and each one of these tabs is going to affect the currently open schedule. There are some more general tabs, like the Tools tab has some program options, and the Help tab has some program help, and so on. But most of these tabs are only going to affect the current schedule that's open. Over on the right side we've got the toolbox, and that's where you can actually modify your symbols and bars to whatever style you want for your schedule, and I'll be kind of going over how to do all that a little bit later. On the schedule itself you've got some examples of columns here on the right and a column on the left. You can have up to 10 on each side. Down at the bottom of the screen you've got the status bar, and sometimes that has some useful information. We'll be talking about that a little bit later. And on the bottom of the schedule itself you've got the legend. On the top of the schedule you have the date headings. You can have up to 4 date headings on the top of your schedule. Okay, to get started we're going to go to the Layout tab. And on the Layout tab, a couple big things you can do is change the chart size and the rows per page. So to change the chart size, I'm just going to type a new size right here, so maybe 15 inches horizontally. And then anytime you type anything into a box on the toolbar, you will need to press the little Apply button nearby. So in this case, I change this to 15 and click Apply Setting Changes, and then you can see my schedule is now a little bit wider. So if you're going to be printing this schedule out onto an actual piece of paper, you will probably want to just choose whatever that paper size is. If you're going to be exporting to PowerPoint or something like that, it won't matter as much what size the actual schedule is. So let me change it to 16 and kind of take up some of this blank space over here. And then rows per page is another big thing you can change over here. So this is kind of the default setting for the schedule. So if I change this to 10 rows per page and press Apply Setting Changes, you can see now the rows are evenly spaced for 10 rows per page. And so that's kind of the universal setting for rows per page. You can do an override for individual rows. So if I use my arrow tool here on the toolbox, I can come over to a column, and within a cell you can just kind of click and drag that cell down, and you're actually resizing the rows. So this is kind of an individual override just for these rows that I am clicking and dragging. So in the Layout tab, if I do change the rows per page, for instance, to 20 and apply setting changes, you can see these rows stayed at that override size. So if I click on the row, you can see that row height override right there, so that's going to be in inches. And so you can either reset these row height overrides individually, just click Reset, or in the Layout tab we have an option to reset all rows to default height. So I'm going to click on that, and it just kind of reverts everything back to that rows per page setting right there. I'm actually going to change this to 8 rows per page just for the video, and press Apply Setting Changes, and that looks good. Also on the Layout tab you can change the legend height. So if I change this to 1 and press Apply Setting Changes, now you can see the legend is twice as tall. It looks pretty good. If you want to get rid of the legend entirely, like you just don't want to show it on your schedule, just change that height to 0 and press Apply Legend Changes. And you can see that legend just disappears. If you do want a legend, I'm going to go ahead and give it a height right here and Apply Legend Changes. Then you see under the Apply Legend Changes button there's a Full Legend Settings button. I'm going to click on that, and that's going to open up the Selection tab with all of your legend options there. So you can do a couple things here. You can change it to a floating legend, where it kind of just floats around your screen and you can resize it or move it if you legend. And that looks pretty good. If I want to get it back to how it was originally, I could uncheck floating legend and change entries per row back to 4. And then there you go. If you want to add a legend entry, you can just right click on a legend entry and choose add legend entry. And just as an example, I will just type example. And you can choose either a symbol, bar symbol combination, or just a single symbol. If you just want to do a single symbol, I'm just going to check this symbol 1 right here. And then you can see this list of symbols. This is actually going to be coming from your toolbox. So these yellow triangles, that's the first row in the toolbox over there. Then the black triangles, that's that second row in the toolbox. So if I want this diamond down here, I can just kind of scroll down to where that is. And if you see any blank spots on the list, those are actually invisible symbols, which I'll get to later. But you use invisible symbols if you want to just have a bar, kind of like this orange bar or this gray bar. Then you can just see the bar representing a task. So yeah, I'm just going to do example, press OK. And then you can see it adds that example entry right there in the legend. Another way to get to those legend settings is if you have a legend entry selected, there's an option over here in the toolbar, switch to full legend, and that'll get you to the same options that you can get to from the layout tab. So if I want to change entries per row to 5 to make my legend look great, I can do that. And then you have some other formatting options for the legend over here if you want to change any of those. Okay, that's pretty much it for the layout tab for now. I'm going to go ahead and go over to the dates tab. And on the dates tab, a big thing you can do is change the date range for the schedule. So this is just the displayed date range. It's not necessarily when your project starts or ends. If your project starts in February, you might want to show January just so you have some space for text and stuff like that. If I just click on this calendar right here, I can just choose a new date. So for instance, if I want to add a couple years or a couple months from 2020, I could just choose that right there. And I'm going to change the end date as well. Maybe bring half of 2022 as well. And you can see that date range gets updated there. We have a few options over here that I'll kind of go over a little bit later as they come up. And kind of in the middle, you have a lot of date-related options. So you've got display date, that's the current date of your schedule. Display date line, that's that current date line. Then we've got display status line, and the status line is pretty similar to a date line, but it kind of follows percent complete, which I'll show you here in a few seconds. So I've got the display date line, and that's just the current date from your computer. But if you do want to change your current date, you can actually set an override. So if this is an end of month report, for instance, you can click on the little calendar icon right here and just change that to the end of whatever month it's supposed to represent. So now the current date is August 31st, and you can see that August 31st in the top right corner there. And that looks pretty good. If you want to get rid of that override and just revert back to your computer's date, there's a little button here, press to clear. You can just click on that. Okay, and to show you better some of these other date-related options right here, I'm just going to go ahead and add some symbols and bars to the schedule. So over here on the toolbox, you've got these small plus tools next to an entire row in the toolbox, and the small plus tool is actually for adding the start symbol and the finish symbol with a bar connecting them. So the way you add symbols and bars to Milestones is just have one of these selected right here, and then just move your mouse over to the schedule area and then just click and drag on whatever row you want to add that symbol bar symbol combination. So if I click and drag my mouse and release, then you can see some symbols and a bar gets added there. Click, drag, release, click, drag, release, and click, drag, release. And you can see the start symbol got added, the finish symbol got added, and the bar got added between them. So for some of these options up here, the symbols fill to status state, Milestones Professional actually has two different colors for each symbol and bar. So it's got the normal fill color, then the after status or incomplete fill color. So for example, if I uncheck symbols fill to status state, now you can see these symbols are all using their normal color, which is that color on the toolbox. And same thing with bars fill to status state. Now all of these are using the normal fill color for the bar. So if your schedule takes place in the future or something like that, or if you just don't want to show percent complete as part of the symbols and bars, you can just uncheck these options right here and make your life a little bit easier. We've also got dependency mode. So if I use my arrow tool on the toolbox, I can actually change the dates of these symbols. So if I click and drag, you can see that symbol moves, and then you can also see that finish symbol moves as well. So if I click and drag, it's going to move the start symbol and the finish symbol because there's a dependency set up with that bar. If I just click on the finish symbol, you can see that just moves by itself since it doesn't have any dependencies associated with it. But back on the Dates tab, you can just uncheck dependency mode, and then you can see you can move the start symbol to whatever date you want and the finish symbol as well. And you can see when you do move that symbol, it's actually showing just a number right next to the symbol, and that's actually the day of the month. So this is like July 9th, for instance. But if you want to change that format, you can go to Set Symbol Date Format. And right now I've got day only. I could change it to month and day and press OK. And then you can see that date gets updated on the schedule area. So if you want to add a date heading, you can actually do it here on the Dates tab, and I'll show you another way soon. For instance, if I wanted to do a fiscal year, I could change this to yearly fiscal for this third date heading option, and then you can see it adds a fiscal year to the schedule right there. Currently this is just using the calendar year, but if you wanted to change that, that option is in the Dates tab, so you can go to yearly, monthly, and fiscal year settings, and you can pick the starting month. So the fiscal year setting is right here with this drop down. For instance, if I want fiscal year to start in October, I'll just choose October right there. And then you can see that fiscal year gets updated. So fiscal year 2021 starts in October of 2020. And that looks pretty good. You can see some additional date heading options either by clicking Date Headings Full Dialog, or you can just click on the date headings themselves and it'll open up that date headings full dialog. So on here you can also choose your date headings or change the background or formatting or font of any of the date headings. You can also do a custom date heading. So if I just set one of these to be a custom heading, we have up to 4 custom headings you can create if you want to. I'm going to choose custom heading type 1, and then I'm going to go to edit custom headings, and since I'm using this custom heading type 1, I'm just going to stay on this custom type 1 tab right here. And for instance, if I want this to be phase 1, I could say that ends the end of November 2020, and just as an example, I'll press OK. And then you can see phase 1 ends the end of November 2020. And you can also do background colors. So if I go back to edit custom headings, I could say phase 2 ends the middle of April 2021, and I could change some of these background colors here and press OK. And then you can see it adds that custom heading right there with the background colors. Looks pretty nice. Also in this date headings dialog is one place you can change the logarithmic view. So logarithmic view kind of expands certain months or time frames. If you want to kind of zoom in on a certain part of your schedule. So for instance, if I wanted to show 2021 much larger than the future years or the past years, I can click on Logarithmic View Setup. And you can actually go either by month, just by checking each month individually, or if you're doing a longer time frame like a whole year, you can just click on that little year button right there. So now 2021 is checked, and each of these months are going to be represented by this expansion factor, so 3 times larger than any other months. So if I change it to 4 times, then each of these months will be 4 times larger than the other months. So I'll just press OK. Then you can kind of see it shrinks down 2020 and 2022, and then you just see 2021 taking up most of the schedule, but you can still see stuff that takes place in the future, or if we had anything in the past, you could see that as well. And if you want to turn off that logarithmic view, you can just do that with a little checkbox right here. And once you've set it up, you can just switch between just seeing a normal view and a logarithmic view. The other place to change that is actually in the View tab. If you go to the View tab, we have Gantt Logarithmic Setup and Gantt Logarithmic View. We only added it in the Date Headings dialog in version 2021, so if you have a previous version, that's where it's going to be. So that was pretty much the Dates tab and Date Headings. I'm going to go now to the Format tab. And in the Format tab is where you can change a lot of color-related settings, as well as text-related settings. So I'm going to click on a color theme right here, just over here on the left. If you just click on one, it kind of applies all those colors to your schedule. And each color theme kind of has some toolbox colors associated with it. So if you check that checkbox, you can see your toolbox colors get updated as well, so all your symbols and bars kind of change colors. You also have the option to, instead of schedule shading, you can use outline shading. So if you have outline shading selected, you might notice that the color theme looks a lot different. So if I click on Autumn, all of these are currently set to outline level 1, so they're just one color. But if I had outline level 2, that would be a slightly different color, and so on. And you actually modify those with this Gridline shading font sizes by outline level. I'm not going to get into that right now. I'm just going to kind of choose a schedule shading option and just choose Autumn. I think it's a good starting color theme there. If I want to change the default kind of background color and grid lines here, I'm going to go to Horizontal Grid Lines and Shading. And then you've got 2 tabs. You've got the Grid Lines tab and the Shading tab. And each one of those tabs is separated into 3 sections. So you've got the left columns over here, the schedule area, and then the right columns. So you can have up to 10 columns on each side of the schedule, and then also the schedule area itself. And each of these can have either different grid lines or different colored grid lines, or take off the grid lines. So I just changed the middle to kind of a dotted horizontal grid line. If I go back to Horizontal Grid Lines and Shading, you can just turn that back to what it was before. You also have this option here to apply new selections to all 3 sections. So that's going to apply any change you make after you check that to all 3 of these sections right here. So if I change the line color, for instance, to black, then it's going to apply across the whole board, so you don't have to change all these individually. And then shading, you get some similar options. So you could change the color here. You could do special effects. Usually when you see special effects, it's just going to be a gradient. So that's usually what that's talking about. For instance, I'm going to just change it to even rows. So now the background color is going to be on even rows, and these grid lines are all going to be black. I'll just press OK. And then you can see those changes took effect. There is a way to change the background color of an individual row, which I'll kind of go over later, and you can also do groups of rows. So if you want 4 rows to be the same background color, I'm going to show you guys that here a little bit later. So also in the Format tab, you can do vertical grid lines and vertical shading, which we call curtains. So if I click on vertical grid lines, you can see you've got just the normal kind of grid line options here. So if I turn off quarterly and change it to monthly, now you can see all those grid lines are going on every month. You can also do a custom option. So if I turn off monthly and go to custom, this user defined type 1, that's actually going to be this custom date heading type 1. So if I choose that, it should go on the end of phase 1 and phase 2. So you can see those vertical grid lines right there. It looks pretty good. And I'm going to go back to vertical grid lines and just turn those off. Just uncheck everything. And that looks good. You can also do curtains, which is kind of vertical shading. So if I click on that, you can see we currently don't have any curtains, but I'm going to click on Add. And starting with 2021, you have an option to label your curtain. So for instance, I can call this phase 1. I will say show name, and I'll kind of put it at the right side, centered, and then I'll do it angled 90 degrees, and maybe a bigger font there. And just as an example, if I wanted to do a curtain for that phase 1, I can just click on this little calendar right here, and the start date, it's going to kind of default to the beginning of your schedule, so just say July 1st, and that works with phase 1. And the end date, I'm going to go back, I believe it was the end of November 2020, and just click on that. And then I'm going to change this pattern color probably to a similar color of what I had before, so it looks okay. And that sounds good. And I'll press OK. And then I should have that curtain that shows up for phase 1 going all the way down. And I will want to check this show curtains over horizontal grid lines. I'll show you what it looks like if you don't do that. Press done. If you have any background colors, it's going to show under the background colors and the grid lines. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you are doing a background color, you'll probably want to choose this option right here, show curtains over horizontal grid lines, and press done. And then you can see that looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to go back to curtains and show you another option with curtains. So I'll just go ahead and delete this one, say delete, and I'll add a new curtain. I'm not going to give it a name. I'm just going to say repeat a curtain. So if I want every other quarter to be shaded, for instance, I could say repeat a curtain of 3 months every 6 months. So it'll start over again at 6 months and then shade 3 months whenever it starts over. And the color, maybe I'll do kind of a lighter gray or silver, and that looks pretty good. I'm going to say OK and press done. And then you can see every other quarter is now kind of shaded with that. And you can see with our logarithmic view, it kind of shrunk down the curtains a little bit so you can kind of more easily tell the time frame in the future. Okay, so that was vertical grid lines and vertical shading, which is curtains. I'm actually going to go back to curtains and just say do not show curtains. Then I could turn that back on later if I want to. And that looks pretty good. Another big thing you can do on the Format tab is change the default text. So for instance, if I click on symbol text right here, this is going to be the default text for any symbol text and any symbol date. So just as an example, I'll set that to 14. And you can see all the symbol text for all the symbols is now much larger. I'm going to switch that back to something smaller. And this is kind of kind of a universal change section, which is pretty useful for making your life easier. For instance, I could go to an individual symbol on the schedule, and I can actually change the symbol text size right here. So I can go to each symbol and make the text larger. But that can be kind of annoying if you're dealing with tons of symbols, and if you just want everything to look the same anyway. Definitely just change it here on the Format tab. So if I click Format, Symbol Text, I can just kind of choose whatever size I want, and then all the symbols will have that setting. Same thing with column text, so I can click on column text right here, and that's going to change all the column text right there. For column headings, it's not actually on the Format tab, but if you click on a column heading, you can see, for instance, you can make any change you want here. I could make this text smaller or larger, and I can change the background color, but this is only going to affect a single column heading unless you check a certain checkbox. So if I have this column heading selected and I choose Apply Changes to All Column Headings, I could change this to 14, for instance. I could change the background color to some other color, and you can see it applies to all the column headings. So this is nice because it also includes columns that you haven't added yet. So if you add any columns, they're going to adopt this this setting that you've chosen. So that's kind of the default text section. We also have some universal settings right here, so shadows, highlights, and gradients. A symbol highlight is kind of a 3D kind of gradient look, and you can kind of see them on the top symbols right here. It kind of has a lighter tone in the middle where it's kind of a 3D look. So that's called a symbol highlight. So if I say remove all symbol highlights, you can see all the symbols are now using just flatter colors and they don't have that 3D kind of gradient. Remove all shadows. You can see some of these symbols and bars have shadows. The schedule has a shadow. All these symbols and bars on the toolbox, they all have shadows. You can just say remove all shadows. If you just don't like how the shadows look, just get rid of those. And also remove all gradients. We don't have any gradients, but if you did, you can just choose that and get rid of all those gradients. This is the symbol size button, so you can actually change the default symbol size. So if I make this slightly larger or smaller, you can see all the symbols and bars on the schedule get larger or smaller. The bar size is relative to the symbol size, so some bars are as tall as an entire symbol, or some are only as tall as a half a symbol size. So you can see they kind of get bigger or smaller relative to the symbols there. Alright, so that's pretty much it for the Format tab. I'm going to go over to the Insert tab. And on the Insert tab, you can insert a few different things like a title, pictures, some columns, and so on. So to insert a title, you just click on Insert Edit Chart Title. And I can just type some lines of my title. You can have up to 3 lines in your title. And with this template, in this color format, it kind of has a background there with some white text. So if I wanted to get rid of the background, for instance, I could first probably change my font to be an actual color that's different than the background color. And if you ever want to delete a line in your title, you can just kind of click on the title and either just delete the text and click here to apply the text changes, or you can actually just select the line in the title, just press delete on your keyboard. So I've got some darker text now, so I can change this background color, just press reset, kind of reverts it to the schedule's background color. Get rid of the border. If I want to say none, it kind of gets rid of that border. And I can also center the title if I want to, right there. It looks pretty good. Okay, now back on the Insert tab, I'm going to choose Picture from File, and then I can actually insert a picture. Just kind of defaults to my Documents folder. You can insert any kind of graphics format in that list right there. I'm just going to insert a bitmap, and when I press open, it's going to change my cursor to this kind of little picture looking thing. So if I just click anywhere on the schedule, it will put that picture, and it does kind of default to put it behind your background colors. So you have a few options there. You can do a watermark layer. That'll bring the picture behind the symbols and bars, but also in front of your background color. Or you can just say show on top, and that'll show on top of everything, even your symbols and bars. Another important thing with pictures is if you've got it selected, you can see it's just referencing this local file on my computer. And that works if this milestone schedule is on my computer, but if I send this milestone schedule to someone else and they have Milestones Professional and they open the file, they won't actually see this picture because it's going to be looking for this file on their computer. So I'm going to click Convert to Embedded Picture, and that's actually going to attach the the picture to the Milestones file. So now I can send this file to someone and they will get the picture that comes over with it. If you're just exporting to PowerPoint or PDF, it's going to save the picture with that format anyway, so you don't really have to worry about that. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to pictures right now. So I'm going to go back to the Insert tab, and I'm going to click on New Column. And there's lots of different options here. So most of these are going to be built-in Milestones Professional columns. And then you also have Microsoft Project columns. So that's if you're adding a column from a project file or from like a project XML file or something like that. Just as an example, if I insert a text column, if I choose text, it's just going to insert a blank column straight away. If I insert a dates column, I'm actually going to get a pop-up that asks me, what date columns I want to add. So if I uncheck any of these start date, end date, and status dates, those are already on the schedule. So if I uncheck those, it's actually going to remove those from the schedule. But if I wanted to add baseline start or baseline end, I could do that right there and press OK. And if I want to move any of these columns around, I'm going to use the arrow tool on the toolbox and just kind of hover near the top of the column until I get a little rectangle with arrows, and just click and drag, and you should see a little icon shows up wherever that column is going to be inserted. So click on top of that, drag, and that's how you can kind of move columns around. So you can have up to 10 columns on the left side of the schedule and 10 columns on the right. If you want to resize columns, there's a couple ways to do that. So you can either hover near the side of the column and kind of drag it towards the schedule area to increase the size there. You can also select the column itself. So kind of hover near the bottom of the column heading until it's an arrow, and then you click, and that's how you can select the column. You can also, in the selection tab, switch between the column heading and the column here. And once you're on the column, you can see the width right there, so that's going to be in inches. So if I wanted that to be 1 inch, I could apply that right there. And now that is 1 inch. You can also go to the overall column layout, either in the column heading selection tab or the column selection tab, and you can see overall column layout right here in the bottom left. There's also the same option in the layout tab at the bottom of the layout tab. So if I click on overall column layout, you can see all of the columns right here, so you could change some more column widths if you want them to all match, for instance, and then click here to apply the change column widths. You can also hide multiple columns in this overall column layout. So if I just click on the numbers here, you can see those columns kind of disappearing over there. Then I could kind of click on the numbers again and bring them back. And you can also hide a column just by right-clicking on the column heading, choosing hide column, and if you want to bring them back, just right-click and say Show Hidden Columns. And that looks pretty good. So that's pretty much it for the Insert tab right now. And that's pretty much it for the first part of the basics training for Milestones Professional 2021. I'm going to release another video next month, continuing on with the basics material. Let me know what you think in the comments, or be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more videos as they come out, and have a nice day.